Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimalo in Abuja. We continue to follow up on and monitor the activities of President Bola Tinubu since May 29 that he got into office in view of the expectations of the law and that of the Nigerian people, especially as it relates to the announcement of his minister, the ministerial nominees into his cabinet. As the amended portion of the Constitution now stipulates that he must now transmit the list to the National Assembly within 60 days of those who will serve as his ministers. He's now 58 days in office, and Nigerians are still awaiting President Tinubu's ministerial list. Well, let's tell you that the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, has continued meetings with different stakeholders since last week on the review of the 2023 general elections. Before the meeting started today, tempers flare as a leadership tussle of the Action Alliance comes to the fore. Officials of the commission had asked Mr. Kenneth Udeze to vacate the seat meant for the national chairman of the party, however, insisted that he remains the party chairman. All right, then. That's some of the mild drama that played out earlier today at the INEC meeting, which also will continue tomorrow. Tonight, our attention is on palliatives. So we've seen a few governors in Rivers, in Kwara, and now in Ogun State. We've seen governors move immediately on the resolution of the National Economic Council on the disbursements of palliatives, who are asking the question, when will these palliatives begin? They've agreed on the ways to go. Some governors have now made the decision and they've rolled out their plans. One of those states is Ogun State. Tonight, we will be engaging exclusively with Governor Dapo Abiodun, the executive governor of Ogun State, who will be telling us what the plans of his administration is to alleviate the pains and the sufferings of the people in the wake of the removal of subsidy. Also, we analyze with a lawyer on the program tonight what happened in court today. Some describe it as embarrassing to the judiciary. Some say it was disgraceful. We'll be getting perspective on that matter after our conversation with Governor Abiodun. So stick around with me, everyone. First, let's check out the political roundup stories.
The House of Representatives is to embark on a fact-finding mission to unravel the decision of the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria not to recognize Nigerian medical students from Ukraine. The House is reacting to a statement from the Council stating that the certificates issued by medical schools in Ukraine from 2022 will not be honored by the body until the commencement of normal academic activities in Ukraine, and that the Council resolved not to recognize any online medical studies by Nigerian students in Ukraine and any part of the world. This follows a motion on the need to safeguard the academic pursuit of Nigerian medical students. Cross River State Governor Mr. Basiotu is charging members of the state judiciary to synergize in dispensing their duties as judges. The governor was speaking during a courtesy visit by the state chief judge, Justice Akon Ikpeme, who led other members of the inner bench on congratulatory visit to the governor, where he reminded them that the judiciary is the only hope of the common man.
I want to appeal that we should all work together to see how we give Cross River State a chance to grow.
As part of efforts to cushion the negative impact of petrol subsidy removal on the citizens, Governor Obasani of Kaduna State has signed an executive order on financial inclusion of 1 million poor and vulnerable persons across the state. At the signing of the executive order in his office, Governor Sani explains that the aim is in pursuant to the state government's efforts to address the exclusion of about 2.1 million poor, undeserved and vulnerable citizens in the rural areas from financial services to ensure they benefit from the state and federal government's social intervention programs. The Taraba State Governor Abu Kefas is urging government functionaries in various positions to strive to uphold the values of accountability and good governance. The governor stated this while declaring open a 3-day induction retreat for top government office holders in Taraba State at the Nigerian Army Resource Center in Abuja.
As representatives of the people and key stakeholders in the government, we all play a pivotal role in shaping the future of Taraba State.
The lead counsel of the All Progressives Congress at the Adamawa State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal, Mr. Aki Olujimi, has announced the stepping down of their star witness, Mr. Hudu Yunisa Ari, in the petition filed against the governor of Adamawa State, Amadu Marufintiri of the PDP and INEC. Mr. Olujimi disclosed this a day after the tribunal stopped Mr. Hudu from appearing as a witness because of the failure of the petitioner to notify the court of the intention to present him as a witness.
You have it, your political roundup stories. Governor Odakwaberi is standing by for us on the program, but let me tell you and give you, for those of you who perhaps have not seen what happened today in Lagos at the court, operatives of the Department of State Services, the DSS, today rearrested the suspended governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Emefiele, after a tussle with officials of the Nigerian Correctional Service. Emefiele's rearrest occurred on the premises of the Federal High Court in Lagos, sitting in Ikoyi, after Justice Nicholas Owebo admitted he embattled and suspended Apex Bank chief to bail in the sum of 20 million naira. The judge also ordered that Mr. Emefiele be remanded at the correctional center pending the fulfillment of the bail-out condition. Shortly after the ruling, the SS operatives strategically positioned their Hilux pickup van, using bringing Mr. Emefiele to court in a manner suggesting that they wanted to take him back to their detention center. This prompted Emefiele's lead counsel, Joseph Daudu, a senior advocate of Nigeria, and all the lawyers to raise an alarm about their client's planned rearrest by the secret police. And this is what played out today. Let me allow you to take a look at what happened. That is a correctional facility official being manhandled or engaging in some kind of fisticuffs with the DSS officials.
Don't push me. I got here before you.
They are giving you presidential treatment.
Stop this thing. What is the problem now?
I follow the president.
So those are some of what happened today at the Federal High Court, sitting in Ikoyi area of Lagos, as Mr. Emefiele was rearrested. So let's get to the matter of palliatives. Yes, he's gotten a lot of people's attention. Those who will be asking, who doesn't need palliatives? Raise up your hand. For those of you who need palliatives, and you've been thinking about these palliatives, so much to talk about these palliatives. Well, it's not a joking matter. For those who are feeling the pinch of the removal and the effect of the removal of subsidy on petrol. Since the announcement made by President Bola Tinubu, it's become a very tough one for a lot of citizens who have now had to contend with the rise in the price of different commodities. Transportation also has become a very difficult thing, and there are pictures of those who are taking to trekking distance in Lagos and in some parts of the country when they cannot afford an amount of transport fare. Now, after the National Economic Council meeting on Thursday, governors agreed, and some members of the federal government agreed that palliatives should be rolled out. There will be some conditional cash to be transferred to citizens and households in Nigeria, some of the poorest of the households. But how this is going to be done became a bone of contention. What is the register? How would they reach out to these people? And these are some of the issues that have been raised. But immediately after the meeting, some governors have taken immediate measures. Before that meeting, however, there are governors like the governor of Rivers State, who has reeled out some plans. The governor of Imo State has also reeled out some plans. But after that meeting, it does look like some governors need to wait more than 48 working hours to be able to show what their plans are. One includes the governor of Kwara State and now the governor of Ogun State, who have put forward a very long list of palliative plans. And tonight, we have the governor of Ogun State, Governor Dapo Abiodun, who joins us virtually on the program tonight to tell us what this is all about. He's also been in the center of all of this conversation. Himself and some marketers had met with President Tinubu, and we shall be discussing some of these issues. It's good to see you, Governor Dapo Abiodun, and thank you so much indeed for coming on the program tonight.
Thank you very much, Shehu, for having me.
Thank you so much indeed. Let's begin. These palliatives, have you received funding from the federal government?
I would say no. However, let me start this discourse by first appreciating Mr. President, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for the very bold and decisive step that he took on his first day in office, May 29, 2023, by removing the fuel subsidy, which has been a problem for the economy of this country for several years. Now to answer your question once again, basically what has happened, Shehu, is that under the leadership and direction of Mr. President and his sense of appropriateness in appreciation for the fact that this removal of subsidy is affecting, everyone in Nigeria. He's met with governors several times, and he's been discussing alongside with his economic team on how to intervene. The word here is intervention as against palliatives. What interventions can be implemented to cushion the effect of the removal of subsidies? And those discussions were also further resonated at the National Economic Council, where decisions were taken, and a framework was arrived at, which different states are now required to begin to implement based on their peculiarities of their various states. So what you see that we have begun to implement in Ogun State, which we announced yesterday, is our own, interpretation of the peculiarity of our states in line with the framework that was arrived at the National Economic Council of last Thursday.
So give us an understanding. So you said that this is the initiative of Ogun State government. We will get into the details of this plan, but is there a budget for these, or where are you going to be sourcing the funds for what you have rolled out today?
Well, again, thank you for asking that very pertinent question. You appreciate that because the subsidy has been removed, and also the fact that Mr. President has graciously unified the foreign exchange market, a lot much more now accrues to the Federation accounts. And based on that accrual, or further accrual, or enhanced position of the federation account, it now allows the sovereign states to afford to accommodate some of these items that we rolled out in our implementation plan. So, in short, the states are better positioned to accommodate, this expenditure that we listed out in our intervention plan.
So let's get to this plan that you have rolled out today, one of which includes the cash palliative of 10,000 naira for public servants, including pensioners, for 3 months in the first instance with effect from July. So it means that it will start by the end of this month. Will it go into their salaries now, or it's a different package? Are you adding it to their salaries, or so this goes across all the workers, all the state government workers in Ogun State and the pensioners? How is this package going to be? Is this a special package, different accounting formula, or it goes directly with their wages or with their salaries, monthly salaries?
Paying special allowances is not anything novel or new to the system. It's just that in this instance, we have designed this alongside with members of our labor union. So we just didn't wake up one morning and arbitrarily choose to pay them 10,000. We sat down with TUC, JNC, and NLC weeks ago. As soon as subsidy was removed, we began to have this conversation. And the idea was to reach a compromise as to what would be acceptable to all. And at the end of those several meetings, we all agreed that a payment of 10,000 naira across board from level 1 to level 17 would create that immediate impact and bring relief to civil servants and of course pensioners that have to move from from home to work every day. So this, like you also rightly observed, will be paid over the next 3 months in the first instance, because we've identified the fact that we need to have an immediate term intervention and an immediate to medium-term intervention, and of course a long-term intervention. So this falls within an immediate term intervention. And it's a hope that at the expiration of the first 3 months, our medium to our medium-term intervention plans will have begun to unfold. So we can now begin to taper off this 10,000 naira cash palliative. The idea is that this will not be pensionable, and as such, it will continue to be regarded as an allowance as against their basic salary and other emoluments.
The portion of the civil servant in the about 3.7 or 3.8 million residents of Ogun State as captured by data available shows just that the civil servant are just less a percentage that is not so much. But the palliative plan that you have rolled out is focusing more on the civil servants, the workers in the state. What about the private sector? Because the economy of the state is one, and it's going to affect both the civil servant, the pensioners, the artisans, the private sector workers. Do you have them in plan? Because these palliative measures does not capture them.
Something has gone wrong.
Can you hear me, Governor?
I just lost you for a minute.
All right, but can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you now.
Perfect. I'm saying in the almost 3.8 million or so of the residents of Ogun State as captured by data available, the percentage of civil servants is just a few, just a portion of that number that I mentioned. But there are those who are private sector workers. the artisans. But what the plan that you have rolled out today just captured majorly the civil servant in Ogun State and the pensioners. Are you, and they're going to go to the same market, they dwell in the same economy. What are you thinking in respect to artisans and those who are not captured in the civil service of Ogun State?
Well, I don't know, Sean, I don't know whether you can hear me because I lost you for the last 1 minute, but I will attempt to answer your question based on that much that I heard. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Very good. Now, precisely, the civil service and the pensioners in Ogun State are about 74,000 persons. 74,000 persons with, their dependents. Maybe let's say an average of about 3 to 4 dependents. So maybe about 280,000 persons will be directly and indirectly impacted by this 10,000 naira initiative. Yes, they probably represent less than about 10% of the population of Ogun State. But what we aim to do was to immediately begin this intervention, believing that the private sector will also begin to follow suit, because we cannot intervene by this means to the private sector because they don't work for us. However, we have other provisions in that our list that we rolled out yesterday that will affect as many of those that are not in public service as much as possible. However, I do not have a doubt that now that we have trailblazed this initiative, the private sector will also be motivated to begin to also augment the take home of their workers that will be affected by this removal of subsidy. Well, if you look at some of the other initiatives that we're implementing, for example, let's talk about our energy transition program. It is not aimed to cushion the effect of subsidy removal just for public servants only. In Ogun State, we have the Ogun State Mass Transit Program, through which we provided mass transit buses that convey people from one part of the state to another. And since the subsidy removal, that has been very challenging because, of course, of the escalation of the prices of petroleum products and striking a balance between, that and, of course, the operational cost and still keeping the bus prices the same. Now, we have begun to convert our buses from diesel to CNG power. And that allows us to run those buses at prices or at costs that are even, much less than what used to cost us before the regulation. So we can now pass that on to those that will be commuting across the length and breadth of the state. So they will now be able to transit from one point to the other at prices that are even below that which was pre-regulation. So those are indirect ways that we can, impact and ameliorate, these pains to those that are not within the public.
Governor Abiodun, so I'm just thinking, since we're having this conversation, there will be school children that will be going to and fro from their schools. There will be also that early morning rush when people will have to jump. So it's not only civil servants that will be jumping on the bus, just maybe, and if it's not part, I don't see that it's part of the plan, maybe there is going to be a window, maybe 1 month or 2 months, where any citizen of Ogun State can enjoy some kind of intermediate or temporary free bus services, at least when everybody are able to get into the system with all of these CNG buses that you are providing. Is it possible, though, so that at least those who are in the private sector, artisans, can also benefit in some ways other than civil servants that just about a few thousand compared to the other millions of the population of Ogun State. Are you able to think in that direction also and assist those who may want, because transportation is a major factor?
Well, so let me clarify. I don't know whether you can hear me.
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Let me clarify. The conversion of buses from petrol or diesel to CNG is not restricted to just our state-owned mass transit buses alone. We're also converting all privately owned minibuses across the state. And we are converting those buses at our expense. They will bring their buses, we'll scale them for conversion, and we'll convert those buses at the expense. So this would afford everyone in the state the opportunity to be transported from one point to the other at pre-deregulation prices. Of course, this will not happen overnight. And we know that with each time we have an initiative like this, where we're implementing an initiative that is in the overall interest of everyone, not just in the state but in the country, it comes with some pain. So yes, we all go through this pain, but we are determined to expedite this process of conversion, this energy transition process as quickly as possible, so that with each passing day, we are bringing more and more people into buses that are either owned by the state or owned, by private operators, and they can now begin to charge prices that are pre-deregulation. In the same vein, in another 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be launching what we call our e-mobility program. And what is that? That's a program that we are going to be implementing by, removing all the existing Okadas and tricycles in operation and replacing them with electric Okadas and also electric tricycles. So you begin to see that in the next 30 days, Okada, and tricycles in Ogun State will now be powered, by batteries, which are, which will be charged by electricity. And this would afford those that would normally ride them now at new prices to ride them at prices that were before deregulation. So we have a rollout plan. It's not going to happen overnight, but we are very deliberate. We started this 6 months ago. We knew this was going to happen at some point in time or the other, and we are adequately prepared for it. And again, let me emphasize the fact that what we are doing is not cast in granite. I hear you. Can we immediately begin to subsidize transport for our people? It would be desirable, but shall we think about it? You think about how difficult that implementation of that subsidy would be, knowing the kind of environment that we live in. We'd have to figure out a way to print out some form of vouchers so that as people jump on those buses, because the operators of those buses have to be paid somehow. And we have to ensure that they are not being paid for doing nothing. We have to ensure that we find a way of tracking the buses, tracking the number of people that the buses are carrying, so we can remunerate them. By the time we finish implementing that plan, we would have finished converting our buses from diesel or petrol consumption to using CNG. So
I know this is not the easiest of times because a tough situation calls also for tough measures. And if you look at it, one of the plan on your list is the commencement of the disbursement of food palliatives. You mentioned rice, gari, beans, maize, and etc. Apart from the fact that you're planning also to start giving out seedlings and fertilizers to farmers. But how do you determine these vulnerable citizens? Do you have a register that captures the vulnerable, the household that will be needing it? Would you also be thinking of how the 8,000 naira from the federal government, when it comes, how are you going to deploy it? Is the register ready? Since your colleagues, you governors decided that the National Social Register is not adequate enough that they are fortunate?
Well, again, thank you for bringing that up. What my colleagues and I, can you hear me, Jim?
I can hear you, please, sir. Go ahead.
What my colleagues and I discussed at National Economic Council was that in some states, the National Social Register might have some integrity issues. And the fact that governors of various states are best positioned to implement any social investment program than having it be implemented from the center. So when you look at the fact that we've dealt with different emergencies over the past 4 years, for those of us that are second-term governments, recall that we were all here when we were dealing with COVID and the aftermath of COVID and how badly hit we all were. And at that time, we managed to distribute food palliatives, including masks, drugs, to the elderly, to the poor, and the vulnerable. So that has allowed us to prepare and test our social register, and also our ability to implement same. So this is not any different. We had COVID, we had denial redesign and the cash withdrawal limit. And at those times, we had to begin to support our people, because if you recall the last time, people couldn't even afford to buy drugs. They couldn't afford to buy food, and we had to step in. So we believe that we are adequately prepared. We understand that process. We are going to take our destiny in our hands, and we know our people. We can better identify the poor, the elderly, and vulnerable amongst us. And we are confident that we'll be able to implement this food distribution to those that are needy. Now, talking about the 8,000 naira that was stipulated by the World Bank from the $800 million that grants or loan that they were going to avail us, or they had planned to avail us. I'm not sure that the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration is very disposed at this time to distributing 8,000 naira per household. I'm not quite sure about that, but I'm sure that since I'm not the spokesman for the federal government, this is what I know was discussed at NEC, and I'm sure that they are leaning towards expanding such intervention on energy transition. For example, like purchasing CNG buses or purchasing EV electric vehicles and distributing the same across the length and breadth of the country, believing that, say, for example, if Lagos had between 500 to 1,000 buses, it would definitely, instantly make a difference in how people commute from one point to the other. I mean, if we had 300 buses today, it would really make a difference. I think that is the kind of thinking that the federal government has at this point, as against the fraud-prone attempting to distribute 8,000 naira to 3 million households across the length and breadth of the country, and the fact that it may not just be as effective as they would like for it to be.
All right. Governor Abiodun, please stay with me for a moment. I need to go on a break, and I would like to ask you a final question to wrap up our conversation. But I know there's going to be a lot of pressure on the over 24 billion IGR that Ogun State collects monthly, because I see a lot of people are now tweeting to ask for roads in Ajuwon, roads in Ishawo, and all what have you. These are satellite communities in and around Ogun State. But then, as you are putting your eyes to serve the people with the palliatives, there will be pressure for you to deliver on the promises you made to them. But when we come back, we'll be wrapping up quickly on this conversation. The removal of fuel subsidy on Nigerians, the impact on Nigerians, and some of the benefits that are coming out based on the actions of some of the governors. Governor Abiodun of Ogun State have been speaking with us. We'll come back after the break, and afterwards, after our conversation with him, Mr. G.T. Ogun will be giving us perspectives on what happened in court today. The activities of the DSS, is it something that is okay in the eye of the law? And what happened today in the rearrest of Mr. Emefiele, is it according to the order of court? We'll be analyzing all of that. Stay with me, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much. Our closing moment now with Governor Dapo Abiodun. I would have loved to dig into infrastructure issues, but that's not our focus. But again, there are those who are watching tonight who are thinking about palliatives. Maybe there will be some palliatives on infrastructure. The areas in Ifo, Akute, Lambe, Ajuwon, and all the rest are people there who are wondering that if there are electric cars, how will they be able to get to them? Do you have any plans for them, though? Just in 30 seconds, because I need to shoot you the final question on the program.
Well, thank you, Shehu. As you can see from our drop-down list of interventions, we also have the infrastructural intervention. And in that part of the intervention, we requested for our council chairman, working alongside with civil society, community leaders, to present to us 3 roads minimum per local government that we can immediately attend to. So this falls under our infrastructural intervention. And I'm sure you know that provisional infrastructure is one of my key priorities in line with my Ishaya development pillars, where I in Ishaya stands for infrastructure. And the last 4 years, we've constructed or reconstructed over 400 kilometers of roads, which is unprecedented in the history of this state. So the areas you mentioned are my border town areas, and in line with our determination to bring more people to come and live, work, and play in Ogun State, we're going to put those border towns on our priority list. Akute, Ibafo, Mowe, and all those areas that are, whether it's Ota, Ifo, Alagbole. I'm sure that they know that we're doing everything we can.
All right.
And we're determined to even do more than we did in the last 4 years in this next 4 years.
So we're totally out of time now, Governor Abiodun. But my final question, as a leader of the APC, you're one of those who preach to Nigerians the Renew Hope agenda, and those who are in despair right now, who are being affected by these policy decisions of government, and it's taking toll on their lives and their livelihoods. And perhaps for those who are thinking that maybe they made a mistake in voting your party into power, what are you going to be telling them tonight? Hopes dashed? Or what exactly is happening to them?
Well, Sheung, I don't know whether you can hear me.
I can hear you. Please go ahead. We just have 30 more seconds, please.
Well, the renewed hope is here. There's definitely a renewed hope. And that renewed hope is what has sustained us thus far. This is the first time any administration will deregulate by such wide margin, and you will not see protests on the street, because people understand that there can't be any gain without some pain. I mean, it's the same vein, you are constructing a new road, there are disruptions on the road, but we'll put up with those disruptions because they know that at the end of the day, they will have a better and more tolerable road. So my plea to Nigerians is that they should just continue to be patient with us. They should continue to hold on, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. All these things will settle, and Nigerians will be better for it. The savings from the removal of subsidy that would have become maybe about 6 trillion this year will definitely be channeled to provision of social facilities that will be that will make life more abundant and fulfilling for the good people of this country. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you. Some of your close friends will call you a name that I won't call you on television, but it's a very popular one. Thank you so much, Governor Dapo Abiodun, for talking to us on the program. I appreciate your time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much indeed. We switch gears now, everyone, and we'll be speaking with Mr. GT Ogunye, who is in our Lagos studio. A very disturbing video that we showed earlier. Thank you so much indeed, Mr. Ogunye, for joining us tonight on the program. The pictures coming out of the court, the premises of the Federal High Court in Ikoyi. Perhaps as a lawyer, you might be able to describe to us what is happening. For a fact, this is what we know, Mr. Ogunye, that Mr. Godwin Emefiele had been admitted to bail and the sum of 20 million naira. Fact one. Fact two, that the court ruled that he be remanded at the correctional center pending the fulfillment of the bail condition. Fact three, that the DSS has now rearrested him. Those are what we know for now. In the beginning, let's start by asking you, Mr. Ogunye, what happened on the premises of the court, the fisticuff between the DSS operative and the correctional facility operative? How would you describe it?
Well, thanks, Jim, for inviting me. As a Nigerian, not just as a lawyer, I found what happened in court today very outrageous and indefensible, in the sense that that act affronts our sense of decency. It affronts our sense of what is basic and what is acceptable, in the court of law and its presence. Yes, I know that, forever and ever we've been talking about interagency relationship, not just cooperation amongst security agencies in Nigeria and how they, treat one another, with some of them thinking that they were senior partners. We've seen since 1999 many fights between the military and the police. We witnessed the Ojuelegba Barrack incineration or arson by soldiers who invaded the place at that time during the Obasanjo administration. And we've seen many occurrences like that. As a matter of fact, regarding the person in question, Emefiele, we saw that before the Buhari administration packed up, that the same DSS withdrew their security detail from Emefiele because it was obvious they wanted to arrest him. They went to court, saw the leave of the court, denied to arrest him, and soldiers were the persons who started, guarding Emefiele in the last days of the Buhari administration. Such dysfunctionality. So we've seen all these things happen. But one had hoped that so early in the day, this kind of thing will not, repeat itself. So it's unacceptable. And so going back to the facts that are available, Emefiele was arrested. It was obvious that the DSS didn't want to release him. His lawyers went to court to force the hands of the DSS. And eventually, the DSS announced that they were going to comply with the order of the court by arraigning him in court. And so they brought him to Lagos from Abuja. And the court granted him bail because he was charged with the offense of illegal possession of firearms, which is a federal offense, and that's why he was taken to the Federal High Court in Lagos, because the search of his house or premises was conducted in Lagos, and so obviously it's the court in Lagos that has jurisdiction. But I haven't charged him to court, and the court haven't granted him bail on fact one, and the court haven't ordered that he be remanded in Ikoyi prisons, pending the time he will perfect his bail conditions. Ordinarily, what should have followed was that the correctional service would take custody of him because there would have been a remand or detention warrant issued by the court directed to the Deputy Comptroller of Prison, Ikoyi Prison, to take custody of the person of Emefiele and not to the DSS. So there shouldn't have been any reason, therefore, for the DSS to intervene at that point to effect his arrest. Even if the DSS had a reason a reasonable ground or a pretext for rearresting him in connection with other offenses that we may not know, and they've not made any disclosure to this effect. They've not told us that they had another court to arrest him and put him in detention. The DSS attorneys, the federal government attorneys, should have informed the court while that bail was being considered that, my lord, look, we've arraigned him and he's been granted bail. However, we have another reason, or we have another order from another court to arrest him immediately after his arraignment. And the court will have listened to that, and perhaps the court will have said, okay, if that's the case, I better remand him in your custody pending the time to fulfill that bail conditions. I know as a fact that by practice, arresting agencies, when they arraign criminal defendant, particularly for economic and financial crimes, with the EFCC, for example, some persons that are arraigned criminal defendants and the attorney will say, no, don't remand me in prison custody because the place is hostile. Remand me in EFCC custody in Ikoyi, which is the highbrow, Milverton part of Lagos, you know, and until I fulfill my bail conditions. You recall that some politicians who are arrested in the past will say, we prefer to be detained in EFCC custody. And such occasion, EFCC will say, look, prison or our detention facility is stretched. No, remand them in prison custody and we don't need them anymore. So even if the DSS had wanted him to be retained in their custody pending the fulfillment of his bail conditions, they should have informed the court. There is no reason whatsoever.
Mr. Ogun, let's look at it. Look, I'm looking at the implication now of what has happened. I thank you for explaining the circumstances and some of the procedures around what could have happened today. But let's look at the rule of law, where all the operatives and every person in Nigeria should operate under. The law is above everyone. No one should be above the law. Let's look at, could there be an injury done to the judiciary today? Is there an injury to our democracy? Is the DSS playing far above the rule of law? Did they show any kind of conduct of decorum within the court premises? Was there some kind of denigration of the temple of justice today? What is the implication of that fisticuff that we saw on the premises of the court today?
Look, it takes two to tango. It's not just the DSS. And I think that we can deprecate what the DSS has done, and it has implication for the integrity of the judiciary. That kind of unruly behavior and wielding of guns ought not to have occurred in that court. As a matter of fact, it's proverbial for me that while Emefiele was accused of perhaps being a gun runner or perhaps being in legal possession of firearms, it was the DSS today that was openly and brazenly displaying guns within a civil court, in a court premises. That ought not to have happened. And so I deprecate that kind of conduct. However, for the prison authorities, I don't think that the prison authority ought to have engaged the DSS in a fisticuff. Even if the DSS was illegally arresting, if that was what it was, because there will always be a recourse. The prison authorities are not the defenders of the courts or the enforcers of the court's order in that respect. If the DSS operatives willfully claiming to be operating under higher authorities defy the court, disobey the court in quick time, there and then, the prison authorities have no need to prove. They ought to have just allowed the DSS to carry on with what they're doing, and then the lawyers will have recourse by going back to the court to say, look, this is what had happened, and the court will then protect his own integrity by then reiterating his order and ensuring that his order is obeyed. So it takes two to tango, and I'm not deprecating the DSS operatives alone, but the prison officials who were engaging them and then close to our turn and so on and so forth. Overall, My view is that that kind of thing ought not to have occurred today. There was no reason for it. The criminal defendant was not going to be stolen from prison. Is not going to be stolen from the DSS custody. So they ought to have de-escalated both sides. And I don't think that what they did today was correct.
To close this conversation, and in just about 20 seconds, because I'm being told I'm totally out of time, from which quarters do you think an intervention could come on this kind of scenario? In 20 seconds.
Well, the lawyers can trigger, Emefiele lawyer can trigger something by going back to that court to say, look, this is unacceptable. A court of law had granted an order, and that order ought to have been disobeyed. And if there's any pretext or ground or reason for engaging in that kind of conduct, it will now be the DSS to come out, the duty to come out and tell the court why they engage in that kind of conduct. We don't have an Attorney General yet that could have come because it's the office of the Attorney General that was prosecuting. So I assume that will have been held to account for this kind of conduct. But the conduct, for me, was totally unacceptable. And he then suggests, which is my last line, that perhaps the rule of force is predominant over the rule of law. That ought not to be so. That brandishing of guns and weapons in court, in civil court, where a judge sits or where there are many judges in that court, ought not to have been allowed, ought not to have occurred at all. And so it was a sheer display of bravado and, rule of force, which ought not to have occurred in any circumstances.
A very senior lawyer, Mr. G.T. Ogun, thank you so much for your intervention and the perspectives that you're giving on this matter. Some of those things that give some of us some kind of jitter in our veins when we see a democracy is being poked in the eye and there is a threat on our society. Whoever the case is concerned, our courts should not be denigrated. Thank you so much, Mr. Ogunye, for your time tonight. Yes, that's our show for today. I'll see you tomorrow again. I'm sure Akimale. Bye-bye.